Hello everyone, my name is Tiana Mandala, and the public health issue that I'm going to be addressing in this presentation is obesity. So just an overview of what we're going to be discussing. We're going to start off with an introduction into obesity, kind of just talking about the history of it, some definitions regarding it, the differences between overweight and being obese, things like that. Then we're going to go and talk about some data and statistics regarding obesity. We're going to talk about some statistics in our own country as well as global and worldwide statistics. Then we're going to start talking about some of the causes and some of the many effects that come along with being obese. And lastly, we are going to discuss some solutions to this problem. So just a brief history. When you think about the Stone Age, the cavemen, the hunters and the gatherers, you don't necessarily ever picture them being depicted as obese. Now, that's probably because there's no record of obesity during these times. Now, over time, with the developments in food, agriculture, lifestyle changes, obesity has become one of the most important health issues that we face today. An important fact to note is that a long time ago, we used to see obesity more common in the rich and affluent peoples and countries. Now, that was because, obviously, these people had the financial means and they had the resources to be obtaining nutrient-dense, nutrient-rich foods, and sometimes they would be overeating these things because they were indulging. Now, today, that isn't necessarily the case. Obesity is way more common in lower income communities, people who aren't making as much money. So we see here a complete difference in what used to be the issue with obesity and what it is now. People nowadays who live in lower income communities are not making as much money, therefore they don't have as much money to be buying fresh groceries and produce and vegetables and fruits and things like that. So, they're focusing more on processed foods, frozen foods, and things like that. So that contributes a lot to why people who are not making as much money are more likely to become obese. Now, in the past 30 years, this has brought the largest amounts of obesity that we've seen yet. According to the World Health Organization, the worldwide prevalence of obesity has more than doubled between 1980 and 2014. Along with this, in 2014, there was more than 1.9 billion adults, so that's people who are 18 years and older, were considered overweight. And of these people who were considered overweight, over 600 million of them were considered obese. Now, in the next slide, we're going to kind of discuss the distinction between being overweight and being obese. So what exactly is obesity? Now, putting it simply, it's going to be excessive amounts of abnormal fat that are due to overeating, eating unhealthy, with a combination of low amounts of physical activity. Now, this is not only just a cosmetic concern, with not looking the way you want to look, but there are a lot of extreme health concerns that come along with being obese that most of you probably know, and we will discuss this in a couple slides. Now, obesity is a more prevalent public health issue than communicable diseases combined, and that's all of the communicable diseases. Along with this, more people die from being obese than being underweight. The mortality rate in the obese population is at least 20% higher compared to the mortality rate of normal-weighted people. Now, we're going to discuss the differences between being obese versus being overweight. So this has to do with your body mass index, or your BMI, and that's pretty much just a calculation of your body fat, and that's relative to your height and your weight. So being considered overweight would be that you have a BMI between 25 and 30%. Now, anyone that has a BMI of over 30% is going to be considered obese. Now, there are also 3 different classes that can be distinguished between obese people. So, class 1 would be if you had a BMI between 30 and 35. Class 2 would be between 35 and 40. And then class 3, which is the most severe case, would be a BMI of over 40%. Now, right here, we're going to be looking at some data and statistics regarding obesity, not only in the US, but worldwide. So right here is going to be obesity trends among US adults, and this is showing us 3 different time periods, 1990, 2000, and 2010. So right off the bat, you can see kind of the transition that we've taken over the past 20 years, and it is severe. In 1990, majority of the map is states that have a BMI of about 15 to 19%, some states 10 to 14%, and in 2010, a majority of the map is going to be people who are considered overweight or obese. So this just shows that it is a problem that has been getting worse over the past 20 years, and it is only getting worse with time. So this is definitely something that is a real issue, especially here in the United States, and it needs to be addressed definitely. Now, this next map is going to be the adult obesity rate by state in 2015. So this map is extremely concerning because we see that, first of all, there are 4 states that fall with the 35% and up BMI, and that is going to be at least a category 2 of being obese. So that is extremely concerning. And then probably more than half of the state is going to fall at least overweight or obese. So we see that at least 50% of us in 2015, or at least 50% of the states in 2015, have an average at least being between 25 to 35% BMI. Now, what we're looking at right here is the percentage of adults with a BMI of 30 or over in each of these countries. Now, this clearly proves that obesity is a relevant issue in many countries, but it is definitely something of extreme concern here in the United States. The United States ranks number 1 for obesity rates, and right now we can see that it says that there's around 33% of people in the United States, and this was in 2009, that had BMIs of 30 or over, which we know now is considered obese. So this is definitely something that is a worldwide global issue, but definitely specifically an issue here in the United States. Now, this is just a little diagram kind of just to really, so you can get a grip on exactly where we are at in comparison to other countries around the world. Now we're going to talk about some of the causes of obesity. Some people might think that the causes are a little bit self-explanatory, a little bit obvious, but there are definitely some things that people don't think about, and there's definitely more to the issue than people give credit to. So the obvious first 2 causes are going to be overeating or bad eating and physical inactivity. Now, I have 2 little bullet points there that say why. So why do people eat unhealthy? Why do people overeat? Why are people not being as physically active as they should be? Now, this comes down to a few different things. People can overeat because of many things. It can do with stress or, mental illness, things like that. As far as bad eating goes, this has a lot to do with financials. So, like I stated before, people with lower incomes are going to, go to the grocery store and buy the frozen pizza because it's only $2 in comparison to just buying a little bag of broccoli, which might be 3 or 4. So this has a lot to do with financials in this sense. People can't afford to be eating extremely healthy and buying fresh produce and fruits and vegetables and things like that. So they most of the time opt to buying the cheaper and less healthy options. Now, physical inactivity, a lot of the time this could be due to people being lazy and just, being busy and not even having the time. But sometimes people don't like to go to the gym because they feel a little bit inadequate, embarrassed, nervous. They have anxiety about doing those sorts of things. So, it doesn't always necessarily have to be somebody just being lazy or not, putting in the effort. A lot of the times, putting in that effort requires a lot of energy because of how stressful or embarrassing it might be for somebody to feel like they can go to the gym and not be judged and things like that. Another couple causes, there's genetics and diseases which can go along with obesity. Now, they kind of go hand in hand because with genetics can come specific genetic diseases. Now, there are certain things that can cause obesity. There are certain people who, just it's in their genes, it's in who they are, that they're just going to be bigger people. Now, as far as diseases go, sometimes, with diseases, you will put on weight, or like with having diseases, being born with diseases, you will just naturally be a little bit larger. But other things to think about is people who have diseases are taking medication, and medication also sometimes can make you, lose or gain weight and things like that. Along with that, your psychological state has a lot to do with your weight. People who are depressed, people who are stressed out, have anxiety, sometimes will turn to food to comfort them. Along with that, hormone levels change, how you're feeling and what's going on in your body. And along with that, what you want to be eating, what you are eating, how your body's processing, all those sorts of things. So, mental illness and things like that also have a lot to do with it. Now we're going to talk about some of the effects of being obese. Now, pretty much, if you are obese, heavily obese, you are for a very long time, it's something that you suffer with for most of your life, you are pretty much prone to getting anything you could possibly think of. Some specific things: type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, cardiovascular diseases, stroke, kidney diseases, breathing problems, sleep apnea, osteoarthritis, like I said, depression and anxiety. Along with that, a bunch of different cancers, breast cancer, colon, endometrial, kidney, gallbladder, and liver cancers. Now, another effect that people don't necessarily realize is financial problems that could possibly come along with having to go to the doctor all the time for all of, all of the diseases that you might get when you are obese for a very long time. If you are facing some of these effects, obviously you are going to need advanced medical assistance, and some of the time, not all of it is covered under insurance. Some people don't have insurance, especially people who are in lower income communities. A lot of the time that is an issue for them. Along with that, some people don't necessarily seek medical assistance just because they don't have the money and they don't have the means to get those sorts of things to help them. So let's talk about some solutions to this. It's definitely not an easy problem, definitely not something that just can be, cured by eating right and going to the gym. It's definitely something that is a little bit more complex than that. So as far as overeating and bad eating, we can start when people are young. I know that schools are trying to make their kids more educated, have, better school lunches and things like that, but it really is a lifetime thing, and it's something that you need to work towards your whole entire life. So starting young is probably one of the best things that we can do. Make sure that our kids are educated, healthy, the options that they have in school are healthy options, and that's kind of, where we can start. Along with that, money, like we've been stressing, is obviously a big issue, and there are definitely programs out there that help people, like food stamps and things like that. So that's kind of something that people who don't necessarily feel like they have the means to be buying healthy foods can kind of seek into. That also is maybe a program that can be revamped, made a little bit better, just to kind of help this issue a little bit more. Now, as far as physical inactivity goes, in schools, like I said, starting early, making more strict physical education courses when you're younger, having it be very mandatory, not only just when you're younger, but I know that in high schools it isn't really as mandatory as it was when you were, in elementary school and things like that, just because you're focusing on other sort of classes. But like I said, it is, a healthy lifestyle is something that you have to work for your whole entire life. So I definitely think that more strict physical education courses throughout, your high school career is something that should be implemented. Along with that, I think maybe gyms, pricing, things like that. A lot of people might use that as an excuse. Oh, I don't have the money, I can't pay for a gym membership and I don't have the means to do it at home. So I think that I know that this isn't something that could just be easily solved, but definitely gyms maybe lowering their prices, having more deals every now and then, because at the end of the day, like, this isn't necessarily something that is super important for people to be making money off of. It's definitely, a huge issue that we face here in the United States. So I think that gyms and, places like that, rec centers, should kind of lower their prices a little bit to accommodate to people, especially the people who are facing it the most, which are people in lower income communities, to be able to have access to these sorts of things. Now, as far as organizations to help, I think that it would be great to start off some, volunteer organizations in communities that need it most, getting healthy foods to people who cannot afford it, getting fruits and veggies and produce to people, specifically probably, in inner cities and things like that, would be a great organization to kind of get people started and get people, at least, on the right foot. Along with that, I think that it would be great to have an organization that, promotes health and fitness in overweight communities, just a little volunteer organization that maybe, gets together a couple times a week, does, some light workouts, maybe just, a half a mile walk around the block or something like that, just to kind of get people started, because once people start and once people, feel good about what they're doing and feel good about what they're eating, that's pretty much where we need to start, because little steps will get us to where we need to be.